All right, today we're cracking open the engine room of modern software development. We're going to take a look at a tool that's all about one thing, speed, and that tool is CircleCI. You know when you see an update for one of your favorite apps pop up on your phone? Have you ever stopped to think about how it actually gets there? From a developer typing on a keyboard to, well, your screen. It feels like magic, but it's not. It's this incredibly complex dance of building, testing, and deploying code. And honestly, making that dance smooth and fast, that's one of the biggest puzzles in tech right now. And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? The need for speed. I mean, in today's market, the teams that can push out new features and fix bugs the quickest, they're the ones who win. But how do you move that fast without, breaking everything in the process? Well, it all starts with this idea called continuous integration, or CI for short. Just imagine this. Every single time a developer commits a little piece of code, an automated system just swoops in, builds the whole app, and runs a ton of tests on it. Instantly. What this does is it catches bugs right away, not like weeks later when they've become these giant, messy problems to solve. Okay, so once your code is automatically built and tested, what's the next logical step? Well, that's continuous deployment, or CD. This is the really cool part. The system sees that the code passed all the tests and just automatically pushes it out to production, to real users. So you get this constant, reliable stream of new features and fixes going out. So that all sounds great in theory, right? But how do you actually do it? Well, that's where CircleCI comes into the picture. It's the platform that takes these big ideas, CI and CD, and makes them a real automated process. And we're not talking small-time stuff. It's used by huge companies like Spotify, Airbnb, and even Facebook. And look, they're not new to the game either. They started way back in 2011 with this huge goal to make delivering software way, way simpler. They pretty quickly became a big name in cloud-native CI/CD, and today they're powering development for everyone from tiny startups to massive enterprises. And when I say they're powering development, I mean at a massive scale. Get this, over 1 million builds run on their platform every single day. Just let that sink in. That's an absolutely mind-boggling amount of code being built, tested, and shipped 24/7. Okay, so let's pop the hood and see how this thing actually works. Let's break down the anatomy of a CircleCI pipeline and see how all the pieces fit together. So the core idea here is actually really simple, but it's super powerful. The entire complex automation process, everything from building the code to testing it and deploying it, it's all defined in one single file, a text file that lives right alongside the rest of the project's code. This is what we call configuration as code. And inside that config file, there's a really clear structure. Think of it like a set of Russian dolls. At the top, you have the pipeline. That's the whole thing from start to finish. Inside that, you have workflows, which basically orchestrate what happens and in what order. Workflows are made up of jobs, and a job is just a collection of steps. And a step, that's just a single command, like npm install. It's a really clean, logical way to build things up. I love this analogy because it just nails it. If you think of Git as the backbone of your project, it's where all the code lives, right? Then CircleCI is the heart. It's the living, breathing engine that takes that code and pumps it through the whole system, bringing it to life. But here's the thing. This kind of automation isn't just about going fast, it's about being smart about it. Which brings us right to our next point, working smart, not hard. Just think about it for a second. So many projects have the same basic needs, right? You need to deploy to AWS, you need to send a Slack notification, you need to build a Docker image. The old way of doing things was to write these complicated custom scripts for every single project. It was a nightmare. So repetitive, easy to mess up, and just a massive waste of time. So CircleCI came up with a really elegant solution to this. They're called orbs. Think of orbs as prepackaged, ready-to-go chunks of configuration that handle all those common tasks for you. So instead of writing pages and pages of custom scripts, you can literally just use a single line of code to get the same job done. It's a game changer. And we're not just talking about simple stuff here. Orbs can handle some really heavy lifting. You've got orbs for deploying your app to AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure, for building and pushing Docker images, even for managing complex Kubernetes clusters. And yeah, they can also do the simple things, like pinging your team on Slack when a deployment is finished. Okay, another huge part of working smart is something called caching. And the difference it makes is, well, it's massive. Without caching, every time you run a build, your system has to go out and re-download every single dependency for your project from scratch. Every time. But with caching turned on, CircleCI is smart enough to just reuse the dependencies from the last build. This saves a ton of time. So how much time are we talking about? Well, when you combine smart tricks like caching with other optimizations, like running jobs in parallel, teams can cut their pipeline times by as much as 70%. 70! That's not just a small improvement, that's a massive boost to productivity. It's a real competitive edge. But look, going fast is great and all, but it means nothing if you're not safe and reliable, right? So that brings us to the next critical piece of the puzzle: deploying with confidence. Yeah, CircleCI was really built from the ground up with serious enterprise-level security in mind. For starters, every single build runs in its own clean, isolated environment that gets completely wiped out afterwards. They have these things called contexts for securely managing secrets, like API keys. You can even set up manual approval steps for really sensitive deployments. And on top of all that, the whole platform is compliant with major standards like SOC 2 and GDPR. So when you put it all together, you've got the speed, you've got the smarts with things like orbs and caching, and you have that rock-solid security. What does that all add up to? Well, you get what is essentially an innovation engine. Now, to be fair, CircleCI isn't the only game in town. You've got big players like GitHub Actions and GitLab's CI/CD, and they're both really powerful, especially since they're built right into the platforms where your code already lives. But where CircleCI has always really shined is in its flexibility. It can work with any platform, and its raw performance and scalability. It's just built to handle things at a massive scale. So, here's the real takeaway. CircleCI isn't just another CI/CD tool. It's something more. By taking all the friction and the boring, repetitive work out of the development process, it lets teams just focus on building great things. It stops being a tool and starts being a strategic part of the business, an engine that really does power continuous innovation. And that leaves us with one last question to think about. If you could automate away all the slow, risky, and tedious parts of getting software out the door, what could your team accomplish? What could you build if deployment wasn't this big, scary event, but just a normal part of your day?